In late 2014, Yemen's Houthi movement went from a mountain insurgency to inheriting a national army's arsenal almost overnight. When they seized the capital Sana'a in September 2014, Houthi fighters, allied with forces that were loyal to ex-President Ali Abdullah Saleh, suddenly found themselves in possession of entire brigades worth of tanks, armored vehicles, artillery, and anti-aircraft guns. Essentially, they raided Yemen's military stockpile, capturing aging Soviet-era tanks and APCs that the collapsing Yemeni army left behind. This gave the Houthis, who had mostly fought with rifles and RPGs before, a crash course in operating heavy armor. It's a bit like a small-town garage band suddenly gifted all the instruments of an orchestra. Exciting but overwhelming. The Houthis now had T-55 and T-62 main battle tanks, BMP-2 infantry fighting vehicles, and armored personnel carriers, amongst other vehicles. Most of these were older Soviet designs from Yemen's arsenal, and as some reports mentioned, they even commandeered some vintage gear like old BTR-40 or BTR-60 APCs, and even World War II-era Su-100 tank destroyers. Before we continue talking about Yemeni mountain goats with tanks, I have to fulfill my promise from the last video. So, here's my ice cream. It's chocolate ice cream, and it's my favorite sort of ice cream. If you don't know what the hell I'm talking about, just watch the first 52 seconds of my previous video you can find on the top right. Anyways, let's get back to the video. By early 2015, the Houthis were openly using their new tanks. Houthi armored columns rolled south towards the city of Aden, which was the stronghold of the beleaguered Yemeni government. In April 2015, witnesses in Aden saw Houthi fighters rumbling into the city with a small convoy of at least 4 tanks and 3 other armored vehicles. Backed by these tanks and heavy artillery, the rebels actually managed to push into central Aden, briefly seizing the president's crib. However, the Saudi-led coalition which intervened in Yemen in March 2015 to stop the Houthi advance brought overwhelming air power to the fight. Coalition aircraft and attack helicopters went in and hunted the Houthi armor from the sky. Within just a few days, airstrikes had destroyed one Houthi tank in Aden and another was captured by pro-government forces during street battles. Footage from that time shows a burnt-out rebel tank on a road in Aden and Houthi fighters quickly abandoning it to avoid getting destroyed with the tank. Smart guys, huh? And they were even smarter to learn that the valuable lesson that without air power, tanks became easy targets. If the Houthis would have played some War Thunder as part of their basic training, they would have known that before losing a tank. But everyone has his own learning curve, I guess. Before any idiot comes and says I wrongfully believe War Thunder resembles real life, this was a joke. A Saudi military spokesperson announced that the air campaign had significantly degraded the Houthis' heavy weapons. And indeed, by the start of April 2015, the Houthis had withdrawn their armor from central Aden under intense bombardment. In the span of a week, the Houthis learned a hard lesson that tanks can take ground, but they can't hold it if you don't control the skies. With many of their newly acquired tanks destroyed or driven off by mid-2015, the Houthis had to find creative solutions to keep using armored vehicles in a battlefield dominated by coalition air power. They didn't give up on tanks though, far from it actually, but they adjusted their tactics. The Houthis began hiding their armor and using it more carefully, knowing that any tank seen in the open was a magnet for Saudi attacks. Just like the Twin Towers. Anyways, they became used to hiding tanks in caves, bunkers, tunnels, or under camouflage nets, rolling them out only for short missions or as stationary artillery pieces. Think of it like a Houthi tank coming out from cover, firing a few rounds, then retreating back into a tunnel or under dense camouflage nets before the coalition could respond. But it is questionable how useful camouflage nets were considering the fact that the Saudi Arabian army wasn't just some unprofessional and untrained army as some may think. They had modern aircraft, weapon systems, smart munitions, drones, and other things. In some urban battles, rebels also dug in tanks as makeshift pillboxes, literally parking a tank hull down behind rubble from some destroyed building to fire a few shells and then quickly relocating. This cat and mouse Tom and Jerry strategy helps the Houthis preserve some of their armor, through years of relentless airstrikes. Now, what do you do when you're bad at something? Exactly, you give up. Just kidding. If they did that, we could have saved ourselves the trouble. Anyways, let me tell you what the Houthis did. The Houthis exploited something they did have in abundance: anti-tank weapons and creativity. Wonder where they got that from. They used asymmetric tactics to level the playing field against the coalition's superior armor. Houthi fighters wielded Soviet-era Concurs and Kornet anti-tank guided missiles with deadly effect and ambushed Saudi and Emirati armored units. In fact, Houthi missile teams proved pretty effective at knocking out modern Saudi tanks. For example, in one engagement on the Saudi border, Houthi forces reportedly destroyed 3 Saudi Arabian M1A2 Abrams main battle tanks in just a single day, the day being October 4, 2016. For some reason, there are a good amount of videos from these kind of attacks on YouTube. Pretty surprised I could find them and not somewhere on the National Archive, for example. Anyways, videos released by the rebels over the years have shown Saudi Abrams and even UAE Leclerc tanks cooking up in flames after Houthi ATGM strikes. As with every rebel group, these kinds of attacks became propaganda wins for the Houthis. Meanwhile, the Houthis were working with other equipment they could capture. In many battles, they captured armored vehicles from Yemeni government troops like US-made Humvees and MRAP trucks to older APCs. In one event, Houthi mechanics mounted a Soviet BMP-1 turret with its 73mm cannon onto an American Humvee chassis, creating a homemade wheeled combat vehicle. And if you're cool and you have seen my YouTube community post about this specific vehicle, then you're cool. I didn't think this sentence through. Anyways, beyond DIY armor, the Houthis also scored significant captures of intact enemy vehicles through bold raids. A dramatic example came in 2019 when Houthi forces launched a large cross-border offensive into Saudi Arabia's Najran region. In what they dubbed Operation Victory from God, the Houthis ambushed a Saudi-led force and later claimed to have eliminated or wounded 500 enemy troops, captured around 2,000 others, and seized an entire convoy of Saudi military vehicles. Houthi released videos from that operation showed columns of Saudi armored vehicles, including armored trucks and personnel carriers, abandoned or in flames. While Saudi officials disputed the scale of this Houthi attack, there is no question that rebels managed to penetrate Saudi lines and get away with significant spoils. Those spoils likely included Humvees, transport trucks, and possibly APCs, which the Houthis later pressed into service. It's as if the Houthis were restocking their shelf by shoplifting from the enemy's warehouse. And even when they couldn't keep the vehicles operational, the Houthis took weapons, ammo, and parts from vehicles, for example by stripping usable machine guns or radios to upgrade their own gear. All these adaptations, hiding their own tanks, destroying the enemy's tanks with ATGMs, and repurposing captured vehicles, kept the Houthi war machine going. By the late 2010s, the Houthis had transformed into a hybrid fighting force that mixed guerrilla tactics with the occasional conventional punch. They still fielded some tanks and armored fighting vehicles, but usually in a limited and calculated way. On paper, Houthi forces claim to possess a modest armored fleet, including an undisclosed number of T-55 and T-62 tanks, a few BMP-2 IFVs, and armored cars like the BTR-60 and AT APCs, and some technicals with rocket launchers. Most of these vehicles are leftovers from Yemen's pre-war inventory that they haven't lost or that were repaired. And every Houthi tank that still runs is probably a patchwork of cannibalized parts from several others. Still, tanks were never the Houthis' trump card since many got destroyed during the fighting or abandoned over the years. Obviously, because the Houthis were never well trained in using tanks. Notably, Houthi sources even boasted in late 2024 of acquiring some T-80BV tanks, which is a much newer Soviet-designed tank. So anyways, that was it for today's video. If you liked the ice cream I showed you, like this video, and if you liked this video, then like this video. And yeah, stay tuned.